Today on the Rise of the Challenge podcast.
I look at the time that I spend with my daughter as productive. We're moving her forward in her life. She is now a junior in high school, and she's in the performing arts program. She takes honors classes, and we are just so proud. And it took me, my husband, and our whole family as a unit for that to happen. But you can't be a unit if you're missing, because you're always gone.
Welcome to the Rise of the Challenge podcast. Joining me today, she's a #1 best-selling author, business coach, CPA, and ordained minister. It's Lynita Mitchell-Blackwell. How you doing today, Lynita?
I'm doing great, Alex. Thanks for having me.
We're so excited to have you on the show to talk about your rise to the challenge. What we like to do with all of our guests is go right to the beginning. Talk about where you're from and what you like doing growing up.
Absolutely. I am from beautiful Miami, Florida, and people from Miami like going to the beach, Alex.
I would hope so. I mean, I'm just jealous you're from Florida. I mean, I wish I could be by the beach.
I know. Well, now I live in Atlanta, Georgia, so no beaches nearby.
Growing up in Miami, was there like a signature activity or things that you enjoyed doing that maybe is kind of different than what other people know about?
So I think the signature activity is really hanging out outside year around. Most people don't have that opportunity. I literally had one set of clothing. Like, most places you have winter, spring, summer, fall. No, it's just hot and hot as hell. That's it. That's all you got down there.
I think anytime I've gone on a vacation, I've worn like a pullover like this. They're like, "Are you kidding me? Do you think it's cold out here?" And I go, this is just normal clothes for me.
Yeah, and you never know. I learned to carry a sweater or a light windbreaker once I went to college, because just because the sun was out did not mean that it was warm. So I learned the hard way.
As you're growing up, did you have anyone that was a big motivator or inspiration for you?
Oh, absolutely. I had several in my life. I've been very fortunate to have amazing mentors, coaches, cheerleaders. The person who sticks out most, though, is my mom. My parents divorced when I was 5. And so it was a big adjustment going from housewife to now entering the workforce with 2 small children, 5 and under, because my sister was 3. And although my dad was always present, there was none of that missing stuff. There's always going to be one parent that shoulders it more than the other. That's just the nature of this. And it was my mother. And I watched her sacrifice some of the things that she wanted to do, some of her hopes and dreams, to make sure that mine came true. And I appreciate her more than she probably will ever understand, even though I tell her often, Alex. But of all the people in my life, it's got to be my mom.
Do you think it was beneficial that with the divorce with families, it was at a younger age, where as you've gotten older, it's kind of just, it's more natural? Because I was in a similar situation where my parents divorced younger. So all I know is they were divorced, never living together. So it kind of was like the normal for me. Do you think that helped you, or did it kind of see challenges with you and your sister?
Oh, absolutely. There were challenges because I was just old enough to remember when they were together. And I was just old enough to realize that things had changed drastically. When my dad moved out and got his own place, some people in our neighborhood thought it was open season, and our house was broken into 3 times within 6 months. It was crazy. And so we had to move from a house in a neighborhood that previous to that, we had never had problems. Well, part of that was nobody messed with my dad, And so we were his family. And so once he was not there, people said, "Oh, well, that is gone." So that was one challenge. My sister was small enough that she did not remember what it was like. But one of the things that I love about the way that life works is that when we think that there is something that we've missed, we have another opportunity to get it, because Now my sister lives in Miami because that's where my dad is. He has said on multiple occasions, my house is paid for, I'm not leaving. So so as he's gotten older and he needs a little help, my sister is there and they have an incredibly close relationship, like talking every day, taking him to the store, ensuring that he's good, kind of thing. And so the relationship that they may not have had when she was small, they have now.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Mhm.
What was the bond like between you and your sister? Were you guys always close? Is there memorable moments growing up that you have?
Oh yeah, we were like salt and pepper. If you saw one, you saw the other. Sometimes we were just alike. Sometimes it was at my mother's insistence. And sometimes as we got older, we did it ourselves. Literally at our last family reunion, now we're both in our 40s, we dressed up exactly alike at the banquet. And so um, she and I are very, very close. Even when she was deployed, she was in the Navy. We would still find a way to talk often.
Did you ever feel pressure being that older sister? Did you feel that you had to be more of a leader and kind of make the correct decisions? Because a lot of times the younger sibling always like looks up and it's influenced by the older sibling.
Oh, absolutely. There were a couple of things. So when we moved to a new neighborhood, so we didn't know anyone. And the new neighborhood, of course, meant new school. Again, didn't know anyone. And it was a culture shock because of the way that they did things at this school was very different from the way that they did it at the former school. And I have always been very fortunate, very blessed that things kind of came easy to me when it came to learning
Mhm.
scholastics, right? Um, and it did for my sister as well, but she had skipped a grade. And so when we came to this new school, um, it took a little while. And her teacher, honestly, was just not a kind lady.
Mm.
She went out of her way to be hard on my sister. And I did what I could, but I was a little person too. We were 8 and 6. And I would try to help her, but I was just learning certain concepts myself. And I felt like I had to be as perfect as possible, so that she would be protected, so that people would say, that's Lynita's little sister. Don't mess with her. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But as we got older, she developed her own friend set, her own awesome personality, and she could stand up for herself. And sometimes she was standing up for me too.
Sometimes we're asked that fun question growing up. What is that dream job of ours? What was that dream job for you?
You know what? It wasn't a job, Alice. It was a state. I always wanted to be a millionaire. Like
Oh.
I literally remember writing that on there, and I think in my mind it was like by any means necessary. Now that I'm older, I know better. It does matter how you get it. Yeah.
But when you wrote that down, you wanted to be a millionaire. Was there a certain thing that you were going for to utilize that $1 million or that kind of that lifestyle? Because it's always like, usually with the kids, it's, I want that car, I want that house, I want that vacation, I want something expensive. But then when they get into the adult world, it's like, okay, that $1 million is going to completely something different than what I want it to go to.
Yes. So I saw money as protection. I saw it as a means of ensuring respectability, of people not messing with you, of people admiring and wanting to be like you. And I saw that as the epitome of success.
Mhm.
Now, of course, as I got out there in the work world and I saw that there was more the devil wears Prada kind of thing, where even the people who are living the life don't even like the life, but they stay in the life so that other people can look and want the life that they have or
Yeah.
that they think they have. And so I was just like, I gotta create another definition of success and what that looks like for me. And $1 million is not going to do it.
So how did you start that next process? Was it going to college, university? Was it going right into the workforce?
So it was a little bit of all of it, because well-meaning people in our lives tell us if we work hard, if we do well in school, and we get that good job, we will be celebrated, receive accolades and recognition, and probably money, and then we'll live happily ever after, right?
Mhm.
And somewhere along the lines, we figure out that it's not true, that this is a hamster wheel, that the happiness lasts for like 10 seconds, and then you're back to racing to get the next high from the next accolade or accomplishment, right? And so I got the feeling that that was the case once I graduated, because I did well in school, got a scholarship to college, did well there, got a big job in corporate America. But then I was starting at the bottom, having to work my way up, and I was like, if I've got to keep doing this over and over again, this is going to become exhausting. But it was all I knew.
Mhm.
And so I just kept doing it. And the buck didn't stop until I passed out from exhaustion. Literally, at the time my daughter was 6, she found me passed out from exhaustion in the middle of the floor. And it was time for her to go to bed. And I was too tired to get up and to put her to bed. She put her blanket on me and got a pillow and put it under my head and said, "Good night, mommy," and kissed me on the forehead. And all I had the strength to do, Alex, was to say, "Good night, baby." So that was a turning point for me. Yeah.
Is there anything, and it's hard in this situation with the what ifs, but with having that exhaustion, is there anything that you would have wished you did differently to not have that burnout moment?
Alex, I've asked myself that question 1,000 times, but the truth of the matter is that burnout moment was the catalyst to me becoming the person I am today, to realize that there was something even wrong with the lifestyle I was living to get to that place. So I have to say, there's nothing I would have done differently, because I really love where I am right now. And if it took that, I hate that it took that,
Mhm.
but I know that I'm not going back to that again. And I tell anybody who will listen to me, don't do it.
It always that meaning of everything happens for a reasoning,
Oh,
where
yeah.
you have to go through that challenge because on the other side, it's kind of that next chapter or the next step to really get to where you want. And it's kind of like going up the steps, like getting to the top is where you want to get, but each step might get harder and harder and harder, or it could be exciting or more exciting.
Yes.
With the corporate American job, what was the challenging part about that for you? As right now, you are doing a lot of different or opportunities that you are passionate about. But what was challenging about the corporate American job that kind of led to you not wanting to do that?
I think the better question, Alice, is what was not. My gosh. What was not challenging? So the first thing was the shift, the hard shift in mindset, right? Because when you're in college, even the most disciplined student, you have a regimented schedule. Your
Yeah.
classes are these times. The caf is open at these times. The places where you go to party, because I went to school in Tallahassee, and it was not a 24/7 party kind of town. It was town for college students. So you knew when everything closed, right? But then you get this job, and they have what are your posted hours, but
Mhm.
then they're the real hours that you have to work in order to get your work done.
Yep.
So that was a hard shift. Then it was the list of your duties and responsibilities that you agreed to, and it was the real stuff you need to do to get your work done.
Yep.
It was the time where you thought you'd have to hang out with friends, but you get home and you're tired. You're just like, is this what my parents were? Oh my God. You know, so those were really hard. And then my first job out of college, I started with a company that 15 days later merged with another company. And it wasn't even really a merger. They were gobbled up because their brand was totally removed from everything. The
Hmm.
colors changed, the name changed, the building changed. So your address changes, right? And so I'm wondering, now I've got this apartment, now I have a car now. Because you want to live the life of a
Yeah.
successful person. And I can't just leave. I gotta push through. And I'm very fortunate that my parents were very supportive and they were just like, whatever you want to do. But part of all of this is to assert your independence. So of course I didn't want to go home. I wanted to make it work. And so I pushed through. And that was another thing. This was a whole different level of challenge because this was knowing that there was a safety net that I could have used, but I was voluntarily removing it from my parents. Knowing that this was a job that I thought it was one thing and it is totally different, and there's no support here. I did not have a mentor. I asked for one and I was ignored.
Ooh.
Yeah. And so I really had to figure out another way to get it done. And what I wound up doing was relying on something that I learned to do growing up, and that was to volunteer in the community. And my volunteerism led to me gaining traction and recognition from the firm because some of those companies were their partners. And so I was no longer ignored. And I was given an opportunity to prove myself at work, and I did well. So I wouldn't trade it, but that was a hard shift.
Did you always see yourself going in different directions, finding other passions and going in those routes? Or did you feel that this was going to be the one route I was going to go in for the rest of my life and I would never have gotten those opportunities to do the other things?
No, I dreamed too big when I was small. I just knew that I wanted that money. And so there were things that I knew that I would need to do. I knew I would need to go to college. At least that's what I was raised to believe that you had to go. It wasn't until I got out here and I saw people who had not finished high school making more than me because they were working in their passion.
Mhm.
And so once I learned that, I was very and still am very honest with myself about when it's time to shift. And so when the passion is no longer there, I am complete. I've done what I was supposed to do in that setting, then I'm open to the next great opportunity. But I want to say this here. I make sure that I end and I leave well. Because when I was just starting out, I didn't even know what that meant. That concept was just foreign to me. But it's important that you leave on a good foot. Now, you won't always be able to ensure that people love you, that they have no complaints about you. There's always going to be something you could have done before you left. But be the professional that you know you are. Complete what you can. Leave a list of things that need to be done. Even if no one looks at it, fine, but you did it. That was the professional thing. Say goodbye. Send a nice email to the people that you worked with, telling them how much you appreciated working with them and all that you learned from them. Because even if they were horrible, you learned something not
Yep.
to be like that.
Yeah.
You know? And my granddad used to say, leave while the crowd is cheering. Don't wait until people are ready to see the back of you, because you're messing up, you don't care, you become disengaged.
I love that you said that because I think a lot of people now, I guess it may be certain generations, they just leave like a
Mm-hmm.
job and and that is where it starts going like the kind of not leaving on a good foot where
Yeah.
you they just don't, you're basically cut off from it. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
remember leaving my last employer and I did the same. I left on a good foot, because you never know, you might return back to that company or you might go to a new job and someone from that job might be there and you want them to remember the positives of you because you never know, you might use them as a reference, you might use them as a connection or a networking. And I am grateful for those years or those opportunities that I took with them.
I agree with everything that you said. And it's funny because there was a company where I actually did have to, well, I won't say have to. It's not like there are a million jobs out here, but I chose to come back. It was in a different department and capacity. But if I had left like really raw, that opportunity would never
Yep.
have been there.
I want to talk about one of the challenges you face medically, but personally. Talk about the condition and what did that do, both in a physical mindset, but a mental mindset and emotional mindset for you?
Yeah, Alex. So when my daughter found me passed out, exhausted, I had in my mind that I would just be able to cure the more immediate problem and continue with my life. And so I kept working and I was bleeding like really heavily. And I just was just like, I'll deal with it. I I hope this is not too much, but I was just wearing a Depends and I just keep going. And then finally, my sister came to visit, the same little sister, and she was just like, "This is not normal. Get to the doctor." And boy, that is a bossy little bit of goods, let me tell you. So I went to the doctor, and they were just like shocked. So after tests and all the rest of it, they were like, "We got to get you into surgery." And come to find out, I had stage 4 endometriosis, which is the growth of uterine cells outside of the uterus. Now, for most women, does not bother you, does not hurt. You never even know, right? But I'm not most women. And it had spread and attached and cemented to some of my organs. And
Mhm.
it had actually made its way up to my lungs. My doctors had never seen anything that bad as far as like the endometriosis. And so it took a series of progressively bad, rough, raw, horrible surgeries to clear that up. And when I was done with that last one, and the doctors actually had to give me this release form, Alex, that was basically like, I don't know what's going to happen during this. That is not comforting at all. I
No.
have a child, you know. I was like, I got to do something better. And the shift came for me because I was like, I wasn't waiting for it to just fall through the sky. I took proactive steps to get help.
Mhm.
So the first thing that I did is I started working with this awesome organization called the Art of Living Foundation. And the executive director for Georgia, because it's worldwide, her name is Mona Shah Joshi. And I started taking courses. And what's the first one? At the time, it was called the Art of Happiness.
Oh.
And yeah, and so they take you through a journey of breathing, meditation, stretching, yoga, and being mindful and silent. And after a couple of years of that, I was open to working with a counselor. And she made me list everything that I was involved with, Reverend Rowena Silvera Beck. And I had over 7 pages, single space. Yes. And she said, you've got to get this down to 2.
Wow.
And I was like, but people are going to be disappointed. Oh my gosh, how are they going to replace me? I had really built that up in my mind. It's so weird because I was not raised like that.
Mhm.
I remember my mom saying, and this is after my parents divorced, and my dad like co-signing, like, that's right. If you die today, they will step over your body and keep going. And in the same breath, that's too bad. Who's doing this next? And
Yeah.
it wasn't in a mean way, it was the reality of how we run in this world, in this society that we have. And yet I had convinced myself that I was irreplaceable when I knew better. And so that shifted as well. And with those two shifts, the mental, the emotional, as well as the physical, that allowed me to do even better at work and to really streamline my life. So instead of having a publishing company and a media company and the coaching company, as well as the agency, because I was actually representing other people at the time, and my law firm and accounting firm, I brought that down to just two. And so I have my law firm, and then I have my speaking slash coaching business. Yeah.
I don't think you were doing enough. I think
Oh,
imagine they said, no, let's increase that number of things you're doing and not keep it only to two.
oh my goodness. When I think about all of that, it makes me tired.
With bringing it down to two items,
Mhm.
how does that make you feel today, mentally, physically, emotionally? And especially with being a mother and that playing a big impact, you're probably able to be more involved with the things your daughter's doing and kind
Yes.
of being around and with social life, your personal life. It really takes a huge change and notice from people.
Yes. You asked how it makes me feel relieved. And like when I was telling that just now, my shoulders were so tight. And then when I had to say out loud and remind myself, we don't do all that anymore. It's okay. It's just down to
Yep.
two. It was just all of this, just it went away again. And that's when I know that I've got too much going on. I get tense right in here. And I listen to my body now. I listen to my body. If there's nothing else that your listeners take from this, listen to your body. It's going to tell you everything. And all of that activity, a lot of it was busyness. It was not necessarily productive.
Mm-hmm.
I look at the time that I spend with my daughter as productive. We're moving her forward in her life. She is now a junior in high school and she's in the performing arts program. She takes honors classes, and we're just so proud. And it took me, my husband, and our whole family as a unit for that to happen. But you can't be a unit if you're missing because you're always gone.
We even talked about like a lot of times you see nowadays where parents they're so busy that they're missing out on those special moments in their kids'
Mhm.
life. And nowadays kids really remember those if a parent wasn't at like a sporting event or a theater class or performance and things like that. And it's so valuable nowadays where you went through it and now you're reflecting on it and now making a difference for yourself. And it wasn't something that you just did in a second. It took time to develop and find that routine, find that comfortability in that.
It did. And I'm so glad that you hit that on the head. It took time. This was not something that happened overnight. I was laughing on an interview I did a couple of weeks ago when the interviewer was like, wait, so after the first surgery, it didn't change? And I said to him, I thought we were going to keep it 100 on your show. I'm telling you the truth about how it happened because people need to know that this is going to happen in steps, the stages. And you want it to because that's when you know it'll stick.
Yep. When I mentioned at the very beginning of the interview, number one best-selling author, having that title has to mean a lot. But how did that start? How did you get involved with writing?
So after I had rolled off on a series of boards, and right before I was about to roll into another set of responsibilities, I had a quiet moment and I attended a vision board party, and they did it a little differently than any I'd been to before or since, where they started it off with a meditation. And so instead of you grabbing your magazine pictures and your boards and you putting what you have in your mind of what you want to do, they ask you just to sit quietly and to think about what spirit is saying to you, or the God of your understanding, or however you want to phrase that part of you, right? And so I just wrote. I wrote what I was feeling. And then I got the magazine pictures to line up with that. And one of the things that I'd written was doing a book. And I laughed at that because I was just like, I have started at least 5 or 6 books, had not finished a one. Just keeping it real. And so I heard a little voice say, just start small. And that's what I did. I wrote 2 pages a day until I had about 47 pages, and I released it into the world. It was called Leading Through Living, a guide for women seeking growth through leadership. And I shared my experience about how I used community service to get the skills that I needed in order to move up in corporate America. And people read that and they absolutely loved it. And they invited me to come and speak to their organizations. Alex, I didn't even know there was a such thing as speak for pay. Like the first time somebody put money in my pocket after I spoke, I was like, oh, I can do this. Yes. And then people asked me, how did I write my book? And I share it with them. And then they would say, well, I just really want you to do it. And that's how I started publishing. So it was not like I set out with this idea of I'm going to write a bestseller and then I'm going to publish other people. It just kind of built from there, you know?
For audio listeners, they're not going to see the book behind her right now, but I love the fire aspect because, as you can tell, my logo is a phoenix, and
Oh, yes.
that title or that word, it means so much because going through fire is a challenge for you. Talk about that book that I see behind you, and what's the message when a reader is reading it that they're going to get from it?
Absolutely. So the book is Live Life on Fire, the ultimate guide to a successful life full of peace, joy, and fulfillment. And this book has been described as the cheat sheet to answer the question, what am I living for? And I was inspired to write this book because I was running into other people like me, like you, Alex, who have accomplished a lot, and yet they were not happy with their lives. And in doing research, I found that 45% of people don't even remember what being happy looks like. And so this is something that they have struggled with pre-pandemic, right? And that 66% of the people that we work with are disengaged. So that means that if there are 3 of us, 2 people are just like mailing it in. And that is scary. And then that 78% of people are willing to pay to experience happiness. Mm-hmm. And I was like, but I know that this is not a pay for play kind of a deal. This is you've got to do the work. And so I wrote about that the difference between happiness and joyful is an enduring experience, whereas happiness is transitionary. I'm happy if it's sunny outside. I'm sad if it's raining. That means that there is something external to me that is determining my outlook, how I feel about my life. There's no way that you can stay continuously happy if somebody else is determining your happiness. But if the focus is being joyful, now the game just changed, because it means that no matter whether it's sunny or it's raining, that I am grateful to even be able to experience the day, to have sight to see the change in the weather, to feel it on my skin, to smell the change in the air. And I am glad to have that opportunity. And it's not a comparison about whether somebody else has that opportunity or not. This is truly focused on me and my experience. And so I started sharing that with people, and I came up with a blueprint of how they can do that and tap into that immediately. And so instead of looking at success as something external, that we look at it from an internal perspective. And we do that by redefining it. Success You're talking about living a perfect life, somebody else's standard. You're checking off somebody else's checklist.
Mhm.
Whereas if you look at success as an excellent life, that's a life where you build your own standard and you realize that it's going to shift as you go through life. Because what was excellent in my 20s is not excellent now in my 40s.
Do you feel that after writing it, that a lot of people are using a checklist of someone else's and saying, well, they did that? And I think I see a lot of it with definitely with social media where people put these lifestyles and they're like, oh, I want to be like that. And then they do try to do everything. And then they're just not happy because that's not the lifestyle that they wanted to go.
I see that every day. And I work really hard to live the most balanced life that I can, particularly when I'm talking about putting it out on social, because I am living for me. But we have to be responsible and understand that at the moment that we're posting on these platforms, we're living for someone else. And it is important that whatever we put out there is genuine, it is honest, it is transparent, and it has veracity. It can be verified, right? One of the things that annoys me are the number of people who they will not go live, they will not take a picture unless they have on full battle paint. That's what I call the makeup that makes people totally unrecognizable, right? And I'm like, you have taped your face. You have clear tape in your face. What is that? And nobody recognizes you without all of that.
Yep.
That means that there is something about yourself you don't love, not just don't like, that you don't love. And now you're pressing that out onto everybody. You know that saying, don't meet your heroes?
Hmm.
Social has made it impossible to meet your heroes with all these filters.
Yeah. We kind of talked about the amount of items you're doing. You kind of went down to two. Now, looking at everything you're doing now, is there a new passion that you are looking forward to or you're trying to find or something that's exciting but it kind of re-energizes them and gets them more excited each day to kind of go for?
I think that is the whole point of this life journey. There is always going to be some new project, some new passion that we find and we have an opportunity to explore. And so, yes, there's always going to be some new project. And right now, it's a financial literacy course that my daughter and I are working on together for teens. And I am really excited to roll it out because it's everything that a young person would need to know before they graduate from high school so that they can be successful as they learn to adult. Because I noticed that there are so many people out here who don't know how to fill out a check, who do not know how to negotiate rent terms, how to buy a car. And these are things that you are expected to know as an adult now that you're 18 and no longer in high school. And while we would all love to believe that everyone has it all figured out when they turn 18 and they graduate, that's just not true. And I believe that it is important that people are prepared to enter this world as financially savvy as possible so that they can be successful.
Something that our listeners like to do is learn even more about our guests. When you're not working, what do you like to do for fun? Anything fun in Georgia that you love doing?
So wherever I am, I love reading. Audible has totally changed the game, being able to listen to my favorite books. Another thing that I love is just really like being outside and walking around and just appreciating nature. And so when we're in different places, one of those days, I'm going to take a long walk and just discover something new that I'd not seen before. I have really loved and you know, I'm not a big like outdoorsy person from the perspective like let's go hiking or anything. Not that's not what's happening here. Okay. I need a hotel. But I do appreciate being out in nature and watching the flowers bloom and the different types of vegetation. So those are the two things that I absolutely adore. And Georgia has some of the most beautiful landscape you've ever seen.
The final question I'll ask you for someone that's listening to this interview based on your journey and experience, what tips or advice would you give them to overcome obstacles, accomplish their goals, and rise to the challenge?
Yes. So the first thing that I would tell them is they have to leave it all on the table. Whatever you have done, it's over, it's done. Don't beat yourself up, don't rerun it. Forgive and let it go. The second kind of relates to that. FOMO's got to go too. Fear of missing out, you've missed nothing. I shared at the beginning of the show that there might have been a point with my dad and my sister where maybe they wondered what if, and then they had an opportunity to explore something more grand and beautiful because they're two adults coming together as opposed to the imbalance of parent-child, that kind of understanding applies in every area of our lives. I'd also say unstretch yourself thin. And by that, I mean, overwork doesn't look good on anybody. Think of it as like frumpy clothes, holes in your shoes. That's what it looks like. You don't look sexy. You don't look hot. What you look is annoyed, and nobody wants to be around that person. So don't be afraid to just let things go, which relates to the last thing. When we're talking about serving, whether it's at work, in our community, our civic or religious organizations, it's important that we serve from a place of power and love. Now, what that means is just because someone comes to you and says, you would be so great at this, and it's a great opportunity and it's positive, it doesn't mean that it needs to be done by you. It doesn't need to be done right now. It might not need to be done ever. So if it's not lining up with your goals, with where you're trying to go right now, it is totally okay for you to say no. Because you're not serving in authority or love if you say yes, just so someone is not angry with you.
Well,
That's it.
Lynita, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about your rise to the challenge. You're inspiring so many people, and we are excited to see what the future looks like for you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Tune in next time to hear my next guest talk about their rise to the challenge. Remember to follow and subscribe on all major audio platforms, and make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to get a full-length episode in video format. What path do you take to accomplish your goals? You decide.